Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to the Ephrata Community Church Weekly Podcast, a conversation with our pastors and leaders meant to continue encouraging you to know God, know freedom, know purpose, and make a difference.
Hey, Ephrata Community Church. It's great to have you join us once again for our weekly podcast where we take time to talk about what God did at the services in the previous weekend. I'm excited to have you, Oliver, joining us today on our podcast. Welcome. It's been a little bit of time since you've been on last.
Well, thank you, Matt. It's great to be here. I think the last time I aired on this podcast was back in May, right after graduation weekend, where we honored and celebrated all of our senior graduates and college grads. Sent them off. So anyway, it's great to be back here.
Yeah, and now it's a different phase in the annual calendar as it relates to the youth. You know, the graduates are heading out to college soon, a number of them, and then a new wave is about to begin. When does the fall semester begin for the youth group?
Yeah, so for ECC youth for 7th grade through 12th grade, we will launch September 8th.
Okay.
So we actually just had our final summer semester meeting last night, had a little worship night at the pond, a little swimming event. So that concluded our summer, which was beautiful. And then we'll have about a 3-week break just to kind of get laser focused for the fall. Where are we going? What is God speaking? And then we'll launch September 8th after Labor Day once school's back in session.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, and there's not a lot of parents who are listening to this, maybe have kids who aren't necessarily engaged in the youth group.
Right.
Yeah. Give us the elevator speech. Like, what could somebody expect if they started attending the youth group here this fall? Is there a particular focus or an aim? You know, describe what the youth group is like.
Yeah.
How many people are involved, all that stuff.
So good. Yeah. So we typically meet Sunday nights, is our weekly meeting. And normally that's here at ECC up in Auditorium B is kind of where we revolve around. We'll spill out into the cafe a little bit and utilize other parts of the building. But, you know, really our aim and our goal is connecting every student with others and activating them together as a group to love God, to love others, and to make God known. Yeah. That's really what we're about. So very similar to the overall kind of mission statement, vision here at ECC, doing that for youth. And we just have so much faith for some of the prophetic words that we're carrying over our youth.
Okay. Like
and what we're, oh man, how much time do we have, Matt?
Well, at least 30 seconds.
You told me about 15 minutes. You know, this is more than an elevator speech now.
What's the one that not only you find yourself praying into or believing for, that you would love other people to hear, and therefore if they ever think about the youth, they say, hey God, would you do this?
Correct.
There, we agree with this particular word. So pick one that kind of meets that.
Yeah, I think the one that is kind of lodged deepest in my heart and my spirit is a prophetic word from a man of Leeds Amados. He lives up in Massachusetts, pastors a church in the Dove Network. Shout out Dove. We love that.
Yeah, we do.
The Dove family. And so he went down for an afternoon nap back in August of 2019. Yeah. And during this nap, he had this dream from God that was about something happening at Ephrata Public School System that was eventually known nationwide. And he found himself in the dream in a California public school. He was brought there to speak of what happened at Ephrata. And that was pretty much the essence of the dream. There was a few other supporting details in there, but that's it.
Yeah.
So that's what I would invite people into is, could we believe for something God to do in our region and in our little beautiful town of Ephrata, among our youth, to see an entire school system, brought into God consciousness. Yeah. And so, not exactly sure what that is going to look like exactly. But believing in faith, God, you're going to do it through this generation. And we see so much faith, leadership welling up in this young generation. So that's what I get stirred about.
That's awesome.
I could talk for 20 more minutes on that.
At least 20 more.
At least.
No, that's really good. I remember when Jude was up sharing during graduation weekend, we talked about the Bible study he was running, and he was getting up on top of the cafeteria tables and just preaching the gospel. Is that a fair account?
That's fair. Yeah. He would share a little bit about the cookies that they're handing out at the end of the day.
Jesus cookies,
but he would always take a minute or two to grab something from Scripture, expound upon it, and just encourage his classmates and his peers, like there's hope in Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I love what you're doing with the youth and the way you're inspiring them, not just to believe for their circle of friends or maybe just for themselves personally.
Right.
Like, I can encounter God, right?
Yes.
To believing that God actually can impact much broader regions, your school, and even, believing for more than that. So that's really awesome, the faith you're installing in our young people. So thank you for your leadership, you, Carly, the team, a lot of people there. And segueing a little off of that, pausing to reflect and consider, what is God doing? What has he already done? Kevin sharing with us, continuing our Esther series this past weekend on a part 2 about the importance of remembering what God has done and really pausing to write it out, to create different ways of reflecting, remembering. He actually listed 3 different methods. One is celebration. The second would be symbols, having symbols surrounding you that trigger a remembering of what God has done. And then written accounts, pausing and actually writing out what God is doing. And want to pitch it over to you to see, one, how did you experience the message personally? Maybe you and Carly, are there any symbols in your life that you guys have set around your personal things that you consistently come across that remind you, oh, that's right, God is and God will do again, anything like that? How do you guys personally, not just as leaders of the youth, but just personally, go about remembering the work of God in your life? Do you have any? Totally. Yeah. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Matt. I think one of the things I'll reflect on is something actually just introduced kind of into our family life. So if you don't know, Carly and I, we have 4 kids. Maya's our oldest. Malachi is next, Monty, and then our youngest is Maranatha. And so one of the things that we started doing just earlier this year is Friday nights. Friday is kind of our Sabbath day. And so Friday nights we will have kind of a Shabbat meal as one of those celebration elements that we're beginning to factor into our weekly rhythm and schedule. And so that's become a little bit of a symbol for us as a way just to pause, to give thanks once again for, the essence of our existence and our redemption. It's the body, it's the blood of Jesus. And so we'll take communion as a family every week. At that time, we'll read Psalm 23 because kind of Friday night into Saturday just kind of sets in motion for us a time of rest, disconnect from devices, from screens, and really just try to capitalize on time with one another and time with the Lord. And so that's one of the symbols that we've really kind of latched onto in this past season for us personally as a family. Is just taking that time on Friday nights just to slow down, to honor the Lord. And one of the things that we'll do often around that table is just Thanksgiving.
Sure.
And we see this, we do this oftentimes throughout the week at the dinner table. Hey, what are we thankful for? And let's just begin to reflect. And let's think about what God did today. Small ways, that's what it's built upon, the small things.
Yeah. Well, when you have young kids too, it is fun what they are thankful for, all the things, and it's very humorous. I love Kevin's story where he shared about his grandson or his daughter who shared, "Hey, Kevin or Dad, you finally made Rowan's thankful list," and it's like, of all the achievements in life as a grandfather, I'm sure that's the most important achievement. But Thanksgiving's huge. I mean, the reasons that God. It's not just a good idea to remember and recall, as Kevin's sharing, over 200 times in Scripture can you see this particular word which speaks to the importance of remembering and reflection referenced. And it's not just, hey, here's a good idea. If you have the time, I encourage you to do it. It's more like it is essential for health, spiritual health, longevity, and to navigate the storms that we face in life, that you are very present with the historical walking with God, the way He's moved in your life, that you have this discipline established so that it's top of mind, similar to the story with David as he's facing Goliath. He says, hey, I already beat the bear and the lion, and he was very present with his history with God. And so there's a number of fruits that come as a result of that discipline. Thanksgiving, you bring up one. You were sharing with me earlier about how important Thanksgiving is, specifically as it relates to anxiety. I would love for you to share that, because that caused me to sit back in my seat and reflect. I thought it was really powerful.
Yeah, so I'll share some findings that I gathered from multiple articles, actually, that you can, so if you're watching this, you want to do a quick Google search just to fact check me, by all means, go do it. But yeah, a few years ago, I came across this article that essentially the title of the article was something to the effect of "Anxiety and Thanksgiving Cannot Coexist in the Brain."
Okay.
And I was like, that has me intrigued.
Yeah.
And so did a little kind of reading up on that, some more research, and discovered from multiple different people and parties that kind of dove into this, the same part of your brain where anxiety would live and it would flow from and it would be produced from, that same part of your brain actually is where Thanksgiving flows from as well. And so the whole kind of end of the finding of this research project and the main outcome was the fact that Thanksgiving and anxiety cannot coexist. It's either or. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
And so in that, I mean, it really spoke to me because part of my testimony and journey was, you know, I never really understood the commands of God when I was younger.
Okay.
Grew up in a church setting. I understood the commands of God, but I didn't understand what they were onto. I always thought they were restrictive.
Sure.
They didn't actually lead to a life full of joy and full of happiness and peace. And so I always had this contention and this wrestle within me of what are the commands of God all about? Because I'm looking at, you know, other things in the world thinking that actually leads to more fun and more satisfaction, more fulfillment. And the commands of the Lord actually don't lead to an abundant life. That was the wrestle as a teenager for me. And so seeing over and over again, you mentioned 200 times this word, you know, this call and this really command to be obeyed, we see listed to reflect, to remember, to give thanks, realizing that is actually attached to us living an abundant life, a life free of anxiety. And so what it's enabled me to do and what I, you know, love to call youth into is adopt a real small discipline, start small, of Thanksgiving, whether it's, you know, at the end of the day or at the beginning of your day, list 5 things that you're thankful for. These don't even have to be like spiritual things necessarily. It'll probably evolve and grow into that. But what are 5 things in your life that you're thankful for? It could be a friend. It could be, you know, material possession, whatever it is. It allows us to choose to focus on that which we have rather than that which we're lacking.
Yeah, that's really good. And I don't think that we always connect the importance or value or power of Thanksgiving and how it can directly combat anxiety. And so to have research studies come out and not only just say Thanksgiving is healthy, but it says they can't coexist, and to choose one is to directly combat the other, is really powerful. It reminds me actually of there's a book called Atomic Habits, one of my favorite books as it relates to the importance of habit formation.
I've heard you preach on this before.
Oh, there's 1,000 things I could say out of it. One quote I'll pull, which it says that meaningful change does not require radical change. And oftentimes we can approach the desire to make changes in our life or incorporate new habits, new lifestyles, go after new goals, that it's like a cold turkey kind of approach. I got to make all of these adjustments. And he would say, from this book, Atomic Habits, James Clear, who wrote it, he says, actually to affect meaningful change actually doesn't have to require this radical change. And one way I can see, specifically on this topic, incorporating small changes can actually bring about big results is exactly what you just mentioned. Like every day, just pausing and reflecting and genuinely saying, Lord, I'm thankful for this, or I'm thankful for this, and writing them out, maybe getting a new journal and call it your Thanksgiving journal or whatever the case. But having that built in, even in the last 15 minutes of your day, is a small change that actually can net incredible results. I can't guarantee anything for anybody or a certain degree of it, but the point I'm trying to make is these small changes actually, I think we can have a lot of faith incorporating these changes. Kevin also mentioned the first and final 15. And if you don't have a daily connection point with the Lord, the first and final 15 would be a great place to start. Again, it's not a radical change. We're not asking you to go from not spending any time with God to spending 3 hours a day with God. You might be able to do that for one day. But that's not you can't keep that habit long term. But to start off with, the first 15 minutes before I open my phone, check my email, go on social media or whatever the case, pause and just say, Lord, I give you my day. I give you my attention. Again, the last 15 minutes, similarly reflecting on what your day included and where was God, giving thanks. How do you go about encouraging the youth specifically, or people that are listening right now who have kids, who they're trying to think as parents, like, how can I help my children fall in love with Jesus or develop this type of habit? Do you have any encouragements for them?
Yeah, I think just around the idea of Thanksgiving is just look for normal times where you're engaging with your child and with your family, and begin to think through, how do I factor in the principle and the practice of Thanksgiving into that? So, for example, I'd mentioned around the dinner table. So often that is the nature kind of our dinner conversation, in the midst of food flying over the table.
Sure.
Brother and sister pulling each other's hair. All of that.
Those happen in your family?
They do, unfortunately.
Okay. Not mine.
Not
No.
yours?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No, we pray a lot in our family.
You do? Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Writing a book on it, actually.
So anyway, that's one avenue that we kind of have been, beginning to embed this culture of gratitude in our hearts that flows forth in Thanksgiving.
That's awesome.
Into what we do, oftentimes at bedtime as well. That's something that we'll just reflect on again as, hey, what are we thankful for? And let's list things. We have fun with it too. Like, we get creative and, act out something that you're thankful for.
That's cool.
Dance, do a dance to it,
Yeah.
And, different kids will respond in different ways, and they'll engage with that differently. So those are just a few basic ways.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
I really appreciate Kevin's encouragement to the entire community, which is begin remembering. And he also mentioned how easily forgetfulness comes naturally. It's like, I can't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning, much less what God did 6 years ago in my life that was so pivotal then. And if I don't actively remember it, it's amazing how we can quickly forget it.
Right.
And so I would encourage you listening, and myself, I take on this, I don't want to call it an assignment, this challenge maybe, to be more present and more purposeful to capture. Whether it's a symbol, Kevin mentioned dents in his vehicle. He sees a dent and he's like, I know, it reminds me to give thanks. I have pictures in my office, different things that represent God and my history with him. So however you can capture it, whether it's a picture that you draw or, print off a picture from online or something that it's representative of something deeper, we'd encourage you to do that. Oliver, are there any last thoughts that you have for us as it relates to like the Esther series and this challenge and charge to remember the work of God in our midst that you would want to speak to?
Yeah, I think I'll springboard off something you just mentioned, is learning to cultivate kind of that frame of reference or that lens of intentionality, and just picking up even on small things. Kevin had mentioned something about storytelling competitions, and how people will just use very kind of mundane, organic, ordinary moments and just expound upon this, and captures people's attention. So at the service on Sunday, my family was there, and I was taking our kids to kids ministry to drop them off in their appropriate ministry areas. And our kids often like to run out of there, so gave them the little coach spiel beforehand. Hey, we're going to walk. And so our third child, second son, Monty, he all of a sudden gets this burst of energy and just takes off tearing down the aisle. So I apologize for those who saw that moment. Here's the backstory to it. But in that moment, Malachi, our first son, who's 5, just shouted out, "Hey, Monty, put the brakes on, dude." And it caught my attention, because I'm like, man, that really is what we need to do.
Sure.
And I just felt like there was something attached to it that was significant that I just picked up on. So this funny moment as Monty's just like tearing off, Malachi's, "Put the brakes on, dude." It's so, I think that's so much of a heart posture we need to carry as the world is running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And so often in life, it's not us needing to do more, but it's oftentimes us figuring out ways that we can appropriately apply brakes to our lives. To create these margins for us to reflect, to give thanks, and how much more that can actually return back into our lives than trying to go find something else to do or to fill that time. So
that's really good.
I think I'll just end with that nugget.
I love that.
Which it was a hilarious moment for me.
Put the brakes on, dude.
Put the brakes on, dude. And just learn to pause. get back to that place of stillness,
Yeah.
to reflect, to give thanks.
Yeah, and I love that quote, one, for several reasons, but like the idea that goes to my mind immediately is like, how would I want to capture that or symbolize it? And just giving ideas. It can be as simple as typing that into Word and putting it in quotes, printing it off and putting it on your board. That's great. Which is keep it in front of you. So, nobody else needs to know what that quote means, but when you see it, it just reminds you, oh, that's right. I need to learn how to pause continually. And so we'd encourage you with that. If there's something that comes to mind, you're like, I remember when God moved in this powerful way in my life 6 years ago, 12 years ago, 10 minutes ago, whatever the case, pause and consider, how can I memorialize this moment so that as I see it in my normal day-to-day, I'll put it in front. It's like the classic, write it on the mirror kind of thing, or put it on the fridge. Like, how can you keep it in front of you so when you see it, you remember, I remember what God did? Because that's what the Lord told the Israelites, create a memorial, and then your kids will ask you, what's this memorial about? Right. And then you can explain to them how the Lord delivered us out of slavery and parted the sea, and we crossed over into the promised land. Like that was the whole purpose. And it's creating memorials is huge in keeping our, God's faithfulness present in the forefront, because we're going to face battles. So we're going to need to recall that. Exactly. Hey, thanks so much for your time, Oliver. We're also at a really exciting time in our annual calendar. Twice a year, we have our Take One Step kind of gear up in our semesters. We have a fall semester and a spring semester, and our fall semester is starting here in September. We're just a few weeks out. Actually, September 7-8 is our Take One Step weekend, where we have like a groups fair, all the different steps you can take, in the gathering room, and really kind of go all out to make sure that everybody is considering what's the next step that the Lord would have you take. We believe growth is normal, and it's normal for those who take one step at a time. And so if you haven't yet considered what step you'll take this fall, I would encourage you to head to the website and check out the different group offerings that we have with our Connect groups, our growth groups, the Institute for Christian Learning. Man, I can keep going. There's Harvest Net School of Ministry, School of Leadership, Thrive Discipleship, and all the other things. There's a lot there. We do a lot to provide formal opportunities for people to grow in their walk with the Lord. But at the end of the day, the most important step any one of us can take is the one that the Spirit of God is specifically speaking to. Do this one thing, even if it's, hey, just go up front for prayer after the service. Say yes to that step. It's the most important step you can follow through with. And there's, 1,000 others. But with these offerings, we put a lot of time into making sure we have things that will really enable people to grow in their walk with the Lord. So if you haven't considered it yet, please do that. Oliver, thanks again for being on the podcast this weekend.
It was a joy. So fun.
We're going to be continuing our Esther series this weekend, so look forward to connecting with you there, also with our podcast next week. Thanks so much for tuning in, and until we talk again, God bless.
Hey, thanks again for joining us today. We hope that you've been encouraged by listening. You can listen to previous episodes, find additional resources, and of course, learn more about us at EffortCommunityChurch.com.